Welcome back to Ghost Pirate Entertainment. I'm your host, Kanan Becker, and today we do another deep dive into Prime Video. And with that, let's get to the list.
Alex Jacobs? Yeah. My colleague and I would like to ask you a few questions.
As weird as you think this is, it's about to get weirder.
Alien Code is a 2018 mystery sci-fi thriller, written and directed by Michael G. Cooney. It stars Kyle Gallner, Azura Skye, and Mary McCormick. After deciphering a message found in a satellite, a brilliant cryptographer finds himself being stalked by government agents and otherworldly beings.
2 months ago, we detected a U.S. military satellite in orbit, a satellite we never set up. And inside, we found an encoded message, one that we've been unable to decrypt. We believe it's from the future.
So this is a really small movie I stumbled across, and it's not perfect. It's one of those, if you pick it apart, you're gonna have problems with it, because like I said, it's very low budget, very small. There's definitely some cheesy elements and some things that, are a little bit cringy, but I think the performance from Kyle Gallner and the story itself really make it worth checking out. It's definitely more of a mystery sci-fi movie than it really is a horror movie, but it still has its thrilling elements, some creepy things, but really it's just an enjoyable, entertaining little movie. And like everything I ever see Kyle Gallner in, he gives it 110%. And so even in this, that's very limited budget, not a big cast, most of the movie kind of takes place in just one or two different locations, he still gives it everything he has and fully commits to this role. So I think if you go into this with the right expectations and just look to be entertained, you'll have a great time with it.
Where are they?
The Descent is a 2005 creature feature horror movie, written and directed by Neil Marshall. It stars Shauna McDonald, Natalie Mendoza, and Alex Reed. A caving expedition goes horribly wrong as the explorers become trapped and ultimately pursued by a strange breed of predators.
Okay, move! Now! Now! This is not good, guys. We get out of here. Which way? I don't know.
So over the last 4 or 5 days, I've been pretty much bedridden, just very, very sick. I am a diabetic and sometimes I have problems stomach-wise and just can't hold any food down, and it's really a nightmare. It's not fun. But when I do, like most people, when you're not feeling good, you just try to find whatever rabbit hole you can go down, whatever place that takes your mind away from how shitty you're feeling. And in this situation, I went down a bunch of crazy rabbit holes on YouTube. And so this one and then the next movie on this list both reflect things that I stumbled across. So in this case, I stumbled across some YouTube videos about spelunkers, people going deep into these crazy caves and exploring, and man, it gets terrifying. It is so creepy, so claustrophobic. I mean, if you ever get a chance to just watch some of these videos out there that people take of some of the things they do, it's just absolutely terrifying. And this movie does as good of a job as anything I've seen at really capturing that feeling. And then on top of that, you throw in these horrifying creatures into the mix. I mean, this really is one of the most bone-chilling, unnerving movies out there. But it's really well acted, the special effects, the way it's shot, everything feels authentic, feels real. All the performances are so good. They all feel like real friends, real people in this horrible situation, and it makes it just that much more believable. So I just think this movie is an absolute classic. It's one of my favorite horror movies, period, and one that I highly, highly, highly recommend.
What is that?
The Deep House is a 2021 supernatural horror movie, written and directed by Julian Maury and Alexandra Bastillo. It stars James Jagger and Camille Rowe. While diving in a remote French lake, a couple who specialize in urban exploration videos discovers a house submerged underwater. But their dive turns into a nightmare when they discover the house was the scene of an atrocious crime.
At the bottom of this part of the lake
There's a perfectly preserved house.
Let's go.
So like I just mentioned when I was talking about The Descent, I went down these crazy rabbit holes and was watching all these YouTube videos. Well, one of the main ones that got me started was these cave divers, these different videos of these cave divers. And I mean, man, talk about terrifying. Some of these situations, just hearing some of these stories on how these divers have died and just everything about how they have to control their oxygen, being hundreds and hundreds of feet under the water, the pressure. I mean, everything that goes into it is just terrifying to start with. And so that element in this movie is really well represented because they're really diving. They're really, a lot of this movie, pretty much the majority, was shot actually underwater. And it's one of the things that just makes this movie so special. But just like with The Descent, you start out with this terrifying situation to start with, and then you really turn up the volume by adding a supernatural element or a creature element or whatever. It just makes it a really fun horror movie. But I'm in no way trying to put this on the same level as The Descent. That's just an absolute classic. But I do think this movie is a good time and really interesting on how they were able to pull this off. Just everything about this movie, the way it was shot, just the way everything looks, it feels real. Like I said, I was watching these YouTube videos, and this, because of the situation being these YouTubers, so to speak, that are making content, it feels so authentic. So really, in a lot of ways, it's like a one-of-a-kind found footage movie that just something that hadn't been done prior. So I think it's definitely worth adding to your list. Abigail is a 2021 horror movie. Directed by Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillette. It stars Alicia Weir, Melissa Barrera, Catherine Newton, and Dan Stevens. After a group of criminals kidnap the ballerina daughter of a powerful underworld figure, they retreat to an isolated mansion unaware that they are locked inside with no ordinary little girl.
What the fuck?
Shit, we gotta get out of here.
To this point, I think this still might be the most fun horror movie this year. Unfortunately, it's one of those movies that as soon as we saw the trailer, we already kind of knew the basic premise of this. There was no way to hide it unless you just don't see a trailer. But it's one of those that I think would have just been amazing to go in completely blind without even knowing the setup. But it doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter that you basically know the directions this movie's gonna take. There's not any huge surprises really in it. It's still just a blast. It's made by the same guys that did the last two Scream movies as well as Ready or Not. And they just know how to put together an action-packed, exciting, entertaining kind of horror movie. There's buckets of blood and gore, and even though I wouldn't call it a comedy, it's definitely funny. There's plenty of really funny scenes. But it's just a really likable cast. Everybody in this are all mainstays of modern horror movies that most of us love in all these different projects we've seen them in. From Melissa Barrera being in the last couple Scream movies, to Catherine Newton, who we also saw this year in Lisa Frankenstein and a couple years ago in Freaky, to Dan Stevens, who's been in just everything, but the list goes on. Just a great cast. It's not a scary movie. There is some creepy scenes here and there, but that's not what this is. This is a popcorn kind of horror movie, one to not take too serious at all. But it's a high energy, exciting, just great time, and one definitely worth checking out.
Vestron Pictures welcomes you into a new dimension in terror. Waxwork.
Waxwork is a 1988 horror movie, written and directed by Anthony Hickox. It stars Zach Galligan, Deborah Foreman, and Michelle Johnson. When a waxwork museum comes to town, teenagers are lured to their nightmarish fates when they attend the private midnight opening.
Would you like a closer look?
Really?
But whatever you do, don't step over the rope.
I've always loved this movie. It's a comfort food kind of horror movie to me. I don't really think it's meant to be a comedy, but it feels very comedic, and I think a lot of that is just there's a cheese to it, there's a campy quality to it. Not so much that was intentional at the time, which just gives it a real genuine, fun quality. But I love the setup of it so much, the way it's designed, where each different horror icon kind of has their moment and their own little mini movie within inside of this movie. It's a fun spin on the whole Wax Museum horror movie, like The House of Wax with Vincent Price. It's a unique direction to take something and still feed on that creepy quality that a wax museum has. But like I said, this movie's campy. There's some silliness to it, the costume designs, everything about it. It's not something to take overly serious. It has a great look and style and feel to it, just covered in that 1980s charm, and one that I definitely think is worth your time.
What are you doing now?
What are you?
Men is a 2022 folk horror movie, written and directed by Alex Garland. It stars Jessie Buckley and Rory Kinnear. A young woman goes on a solo vacation to the English countryside, following the tragic death of her ex-husband.
Something happened. My husband went upstairs to our balcony and let himself go.
So hear me out. I understand a lot of people hate on this movie, and if you're not a fan of it, that's fine. I get it. That's okay. And if you've heard a lot of bad things about it, and so that's why you haven't checked it out, I get it. Because like I said, there's been a lot of people that have been really down on this movie. And I'll in no way say it's a perfect movie. I do understand that the message is kind of heavy-handed, and because of that, it doesn't quite land. But this is written and directed by a man. So this isn't a woman out there just hating on men. This is more of a man trying to look at other men and maybe the way that women see us. This is the way he sees it, his interpretation of that. And there's a lot of layers to this, a lot that's trying to be said here. And so if you're turned off by the message and things like that, that's fine, I get it. But if you look at this as just a horror movie and the aesthetics of it and things like that, this is a work of art. I mean, it's gorgeous. Alex Garland's known for just how amazing his movies look, but just the feel of this, the way he shoots it, all the creative, artistic elements around shooting it and performances and all that are just awesome here. On top of that, it really goes for it. And I know it was too weird for a lot of people, and that's fine. But for me, I loved it. I thought it was super creative. I thought it did some things with body horror and stuff that you just don't see, something I've never seen before and I'll never get out of my mind. And so no matter how much I may say this movie is flawed, I also just as much think it's worth seeing. There really is a lot of good here as well. The sound design, the way it's directed. I also think the cast is just incredible here. I mean, Rory Kinnear plays so many different roles in this, and I think does a great job at making all of them unique and different, but all terrifyingly creepy in their own way. So is it flawed? Sure. And if you're someone out there that has seen it and hated it, that's fine. I'm not judging anyone for that. But I think if you're someone out there that has not seen this because of word of mouth and this and that, maybe it's time to give it a look, because I think you might be surprised. The Invitation is a 2015 horror movie. Directed by Karen Kusuma, it stars Logan Marshall Green, Mikkel Hausman, and John Carroll Lynch. While attending a dinner party at his former house, a man starts to believe that his ex-wife and her new husband have a sinister plan for their guest.
Bars on the windows and no?
Security. Safer.
You've been acting so suspicious of our hospitality.
This movie is so good. It is such a well-done psychological thriller. It's one of those movies that just continually, slowly builds the tension, the anxiety. It's uncomfortable. It just gets so creepy and awkward. It just feels like you could just cut the tension with a knife. And a lot of that is Logan Marshall Green. He is brilliant in this movie. He just conveys so much through his expressions, his body language, things things like that, because there are times in this movie where there isn't necessarily a ton of dialogue of what he's saying that makes you realize what he's feeling or thinking, but just his mannerisms and the way he's acting to other people. It just feels so real. And as someone who's experienced, going over to an ex's house and with her new husband and all that kind of thing, there can be some real awkward, very strange feeling moments. Even if you're on good terms, even if you consider that person to be a friend, there are still these moments that just feel awkward. And especially in a situation like this, where this is his old home. Like, he used to live here with his wife and now she's with a new guy. I mean, that's an awkward situation. But then you inject into this really strange, uncomfortable situation, something that's foreboding, and little by little, you're getting the pieces of this puzzle of what really is going on here. It just makes for a fantastic movie. And the directions that this goes and where it ultimately ends up are just fantastic. This is an intense nail-biter that'll keep you on the edge of your seat, and one that I think is an absolute must-see.
Just you and me now, sport. One hunter. I'm gonna find you, damn it.
FBI agent Will Graham. Manhunter.
Manhunter is a 1986 thriller written and directed by Michael Mann. It's based on the 1981 novel Red Dragon by Thomas Harris and stars William Peterson, Tom Noonan, and Brian Cox. Former FBI profiler Will Graham returns to service to pursue a deranged serial killer dubbed the Tooth Fairy by the media.
This is what the subject's teeth look like.
So I'm a huge fan of the series Hannibal from a while back. I've always wished that they would continue it somewhere, that one of these other networks would have picked it up for a season 4, but unfortunately, it's just never happened. But that was basically using the same source material for that, as well as the movie Red Dragon from a while back, the same thing. And I think it's cool because each one feels very unique, but they're all special in their own way. There's just such a great energy and vibe to this. And it's really cool to see Brian Cox give his interpretation on the Hannibal Lecter character, because even though Anthony Hopkins will always be Hannibal Lecter to me and most people, Brian Cox gives a hell of a performance here and makes that character very creepy as well. But Tom Noonan, to me, as the Tooth Fairy, is what really makes this movie a must-see. He is so unnerving. The way he plays this character, just absolutely terrifying. Honestly, nightmare fuel. But if you're a fan of Silence of the Lambs or any of the Hannibal stories, including the series, and you haven't seen this one, I think you should do yourself a favor and check this out, because it's special as well.
I can't do it alone. I need you.
Your ass is going to jail!
What the?
Unseen is a 2023 comedy thriller directed by Yoko Ukumura in her directorial debut. It stars Midori Francis, Jolene Purdy, and Michael Patrick Lane. Sam receives a call from Emily, a nearly blind woman who is running from her murderous ex in the woods. So she must survive the ordeal, with Sam being her eyes using video call.
I've been drugged and kidnapped by my ex, and I can't see anything because I broke my glasses.
Who's this? Are you 911?
No.
This is such a colorful, vibrant, exciting movie. It's a real shame how much this flew under the radar last year. I've talked about it once before, but it just doesn't seem like it got much traction. Probably when it was released, it was just kind of buried under a bunch of other, late September, early October releases. But the cast is great. They're really likable and relatable. It gets super intense and goes in some really surprising directions. Goes a lot harder. It gets more violent and things like that than I expected. But then on top of that, it's hilarious. There are some really funny scenes in this that are action-packed and exciting and intense, but yet because of the situation and the scenario, they become awkwardly funny in a really fantastic way. I just really love this filmmaker, and I'm excited to see what she does going forward in the future, because there's just a real unique feel about this movie in general. But if you're looking for a movie that's intense and exciting, a real nail-biter that'll keep you on the edge of your seat, while also not taking itself too serious at the same time, still having fun, being a little quirky and charming, then I think this is an absolute must-see.
If she attacks him, he becomes like her.
I just get a little confused sometimes.
No! Return of the Living Dead 3 is a 1993 zombie horror movie. Directed by Brian Usna, it stars Melinda Clarke, J. Trevor Edmond, and Kent McCord. Having recently witnessed the horrific results of a top-secret project to bring the dead back to life, a distraught youth performs the operation on his girlfriend after she's killed in a motorcycle accident.
They came back to life.
We gotta get out of here. And tonight, fate will put their promises to the test.
So I think it's a real crime how little this movie's talked about, how in a lot of ways it's just been forgotten. Because as much love as I've heard the last few years for Return of the Living Dead and how much of a cult favorite that movie is, nobody ever talks about this one. And it's a shame. I think a lot of it is because that second one, Return of the Living Dead 2, was kind of not good at all. It was just boring and tried to retread a lot of the things that the first one didn't really bring enough new to the situation. Just in general, it was an uninspired, just not a very good movie. But this is a totally different situation. For one, this doesn't lean nearly as much into the humor as the first one did. This is much more of a serious drama, horror, love story kind of thing. And the cast really gives it their all in this. You can really feel how passionate they were and how serious they took these roles they were in. Especially Melinda Clarke and J. Trevor Edmond. Both of them just are incredible. You really believe that they're in love. You believe the situation, just the pain, the anxiety, the emotions, the different things that they convey in this are a lot more impressive than you would expect for a sequel to such a silly franchise as this. But don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of camp in this. There's still a lot of cheese in this. I'm just saying it isn't up front as funny. It's not trying to be as slapsticky and silly maybe as the first one. But another reason that this movie deserves more credit and more love is the practical effects, man. They're amazing in this. There are so many cool zombie scenes, different gore scenes, but also the transformation of Melinda Clarke. It's just fantastic. It really is awesome to see. On top of that, Melinda Clarke is incredibly hot in this movie. I had the biggest crush on her back in the day. She's just gorgeous, and I never would have thought that a zombie could be as sexy as she makes it in this movie. But it's really just a good time. It's one not to take overly serious, one that I think is a perfect pick for this Saturday night. So do yourself a favor this weekend, pick one of the movies off of this list, grab your popcorn and your candy, and enjoy! And I want to give a huge, massive, enormous thank you to the Ghost Pirate crew, to you guys over on Patreon, and to the channel members over here. You guys mean so much to me. And if you would like to help support this channel over on Patreon, there's a link down in the description. Or you can become a channel member by clicking on that join button down there and support the channel that way. But like always, thank you so much for watching. Please crush that like button. And remember, guys, horror can be fun. And if you enjoyed this, click right here to watch me talk about 10 horror movies over on Tubi that I think you definitely should check out. And I'll see you guys next time.